The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the Mojave station, and Dalton Fairweather stepped out into the scorching California heat with legs that threatened to buckle beneath her black traveling dress, a testament to 3 weeks of bone-jarring travel from Boston that had left her exhausted in ways she had never imagined possible. The year was 1879, and everything about this harsh landscape seemed determined to prove that her mother had been right when she clutched her daughter's hands and begged her not to make this foolish journey west to claim the property her late uncle had left her in his will. The dust alone was enough to choke on, thick and gritty in the air, settling on her skin and clothes with the persistence of something alive. Dalton pressed a handkerchief to her mouth and tried not to cough, tried not to show the weakness that every eye in this frontier town seemed eager to spot in her pale face and slender frame. "You are Miss Fairweather." A gruff voice cut through the haze of heat and fatigue. Dalton turned to find a weathered man with silver streaking his dark hair, his face lined deep from years under the merciless sun. "Name is Tucker. Your uncle hired me as foreman before he passed. Been running the ranch these past months." "Yes, I am Dalton Fairweather." She extended her hand, noting how his calloused palm swallowed hers entirely. "Thank you for maintaining the property. I hope to learn quickly how things operate here." Tucker's expression was not unkind, but doubt clouded his eyes as he took in her appearance. She knew what he saw. A woman barely 23 years old, thin as a willow branch, with fair skin that burned rather than tanned, and hands that had never known harder labor than needlework or turning the pages of books. Her dark blonde hair was already escaping its pins from the journey, and she probably looked half dead from the heat. "Miss Fairweather, I will speak plain. Your uncle's spread is 3,000 acres of hard country. Takes a strong back and stronger will to make it work. Maybe you should consider selling to one of the neighboring ranchers and heading back east where I belong," Dalton finished, a flash of something sharp cutting through her exhaustion. "I have heard that sentiment expressed in various forms since I announced my intention to come west. I assure you, Mr. Tucker, I did not travel 2,000 miles to turn around at the first suggestion that I am too fragile for this life. Did not mean offense, miss, just the way of things out here. Then perhaps the way of things needs to change." Dalton lifted her chin, ignoring the way her head swam from the heat. "Please show me to the ranch." The wagon ride to the property took another hour, winding through landscape that was beautiful in its starkness, all golden hills dotted with hardy scrub brush, and the occasional twisted Joshua tree reaching toward the cloudless sky. Tucker pointed out landmarks and boundaries, explaining water rights and grazing patterns in clipped sentences that suggested he expected her to understand things she had only read about in books. Dalton listened intently, committing everything to memory even as the heat pressed down on her like a physical weight. The ranch house appeared as they crested a low hill, a sturdy adobe structure with a wide porch that offered the promise of shade. Outbuildings dotted the property. A barn, corrals, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. It was more substantial than she had imagined, and for the first time since stepping off the stagecoach, Dalton felt something other than dread. This was hers. Her chance to build something, to prove that a woman could stand on her own even in this harsh country. "We run about 200 head of cattle," Tucker was saying as he helped her down from the wagon. "Got 5 hands working regular, though we could use more come roundup time." Your uncle was fair but firm. Men respected him. "And will they respect me?" Dalton asked, though she already knew the answer. Tucker's silence was answer enough. The first few days passed in a blur of overwhelming information and barely concealed skepticism from everyone Dalton encountered. The ranch hands were polite, but distant. answering her questions with the patience one might show a child asking about matters beyond her understanding. She caught them exchanging looks when she struggled with the weight of a water bucket, when she had to retreat indoors during the hottest part of the afternoon, when her pale skin burned angry red despite the bonnet she wore. Each pitying glance felt like a small defeat, confirmation that she was exactly what they thought, too fragile for this life. On the fourth morning, Dalton woke before dawn with determination hardening in her chest. She dressed in the most practical clothing she had brought, a simple cotton dress in dark blue, and made her way to the barn where Tucker had said they would be sorting cattle for branding. The air was still cool, a brief respite before the sun began its relentless assault, and the ranch was just coming to life with the sounds of men and animals beginning their day. "Miss Fairweather." Tucker looked surprised to see her. "You do not need to be out here for this. It is going to be dusty, hot work. This is my ranch, Mr. Tucker. I need to understand every aspect of how it operates." Dalton kept her voice steady. "I will stay out of the way, but I will learn." What followed was a brutal education in just how little she knew, and how much her body was unprepared for this life. The dust was worse than anything she had experienced in town, rising in choking clouds as the cattle were driven through the corrals. The heat climbed steadily as the morning wore on, and despite staying in the shade as much as possible, Dalton felt it sapping her strength with ruthless efficiency. The sounds were overwhelming: bawling cattle, shouting men, the sharp crack of ropes and thud of hooves against packed earth. But it was when she saw the actual branding that her careful composure finally shattered. The smell of burning hide, the distress of the animals, the casual efficiency with which the men worked, it all combined into a sensory assault that left her dizzy and nauseated. She managed to maintain her position for another 10 minutes before the edges of her vision started to darken, and her legs simply gave out beneath her. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her with an ease that would have been embarrassing if she had been conscious enough to register it. Dalton was dimly aware of being carried away from the noise and heat, of being settled in shade, of a water canteen being pressed to her lips. "Drink slowly." The voice was different from the others she had heard, younger and with a warmth that cut through her disorientation. "You are all right. Just got too hot is all." Dalton blinked, her vision clear, and found herself looking up at a man she had not seen before on the property. He was crouched beside her, his hat pushed back to reveal dark brown hair and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. He could not have been more than 25, with the kind of face that was handsome in a rough-hewn way, all strong angles and sun-bronzed skin. But it was his expression that struck her most. Concern without pity, a kind of understanding that steadied her more than the water he offered. "I apologize," Dalton managed, mortified at her weakness. "I thought I could manage better than that." "Nothing to apologize for. Heat out here kills people who have lived in it their whole lives. You just got here from back east, right? Body needs time to adjust." He settled into a more comfortable position, apparently in no hurry to get back to work. "Name is Wade Vaughn. I run cattle on the spread that borders yours to the north. You are not one of my ranch hands." "No, miss. Tucker asked me to come help with the sorting today since you are down a few men. I do that sometimes, help neighbors when they need it. Your uncle did the same for me when I was getting started a few years back." Wade handed her the canteen again. "Drink more. You need to get your strength back." "Everyone keeps telling me what I need." Dalton heard the bitterness in her own voice and immediately regretted it. This man had just kept her from cracking her skull open on the ground. "I apologize again. That was ungracious of me. Understanding, though." Wade studied her with those amber eyes, and Dalton had the uncomfortable feeling he was seeing more than she wanted to reveal. "Tucker mentioned your uncle left you the place. That is a lot to take on for anyone, let alone someone not used to ranch life. You think I should sell too?" It was not a question. "I think you should do whatever feels right to you." Wade stood, offering his hand to help her up. "But I will say this. If you are determined to make a go of it, you are going to need to learn this land's rhythms. Can't fight the desert. Have to learn when to push and when to rest. Otherwise, it will break you." Dalton accepted his hand, surprised by how steady she felt once on her feet. "And if I cannot learn quickly enough, if I am simply too—" She could not bring herself to say the word. "Too fragile." Wade supplied, his tone neutral. "That what people have been telling you? In various ways, yes. Well, I have seen plenty of big, strong men fail out here because they were too stubborn to adapt. Being tough is not just about muscle and endurance. It is about being smart enough to know your limits and work within them while you build yourself up." Wade settled his hat back into place, his expression thoughtful. "You made it this far. That takes its own kind of strength." Before Dalton could respond, Tucker appeared around the corner of the barn, his face creased with concern. "Miss Fairweather, I saw you go down. Should get you back to the house." "I am fine now, thank you to Mr. Vaughn." Dalton straightened her shoulders. "But perhaps you are right. I will return to the house and review the ranch accounts this afternoon." The walk back felt longer than it should have, and Dalton was acutely aware of the picture she must present. The fragile Eastern woman who could not even last a morning watching ranch work. But Wade's words lingered in her mind, offering a different perspective than the dismissive doubt she had encountered since arriving. Being smart enough to know your limits while you build yourself up. Perhaps that was not surrender but strategy. The days that followed established a pattern. Dalton rose early, before the worst heat of the day, and spent those precious cool hours learning everything she could about the practical running of the ranch. She reviewed accounts, studied maps of the property, questioned Tucker relentlessly about everything from water sources to market prices for cattle. When the afternoon heat became unbearable, she retreated indoors, but used that time to read everything she could find about ranching in desert country, making notes and plans in a leather journal she had brought from Boston. And every few days, Wade Vaughn appeared at the ranch. Sometimes, he came to help with specific tasks. Other times he rode over with questions about shared boundaries or water rights. Neighborly consultations that gave Dalton glimpses into how cooperation worked in this harsh country. Each time, he treated her with a respect she was not receiving from her own ranch hands, answering her questions without condescension, and offering suggestions in a way that never felt like criticism. "You are thinking about this wrong," Wade said one evening when he had stayed for supper after helping repair a section of fence. They sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple that took Dalton's breath away. "You are trying to do everything the way your uncle did, the way a man would. But you are not a man, and that is not a weakness. Tell that to everyone who thinks I should sell and go back where I belong." Dalton kept her voice light, but the frustration bled through. "What I mean is, you have different strengths. Your uncle ran this place through sheer force of will and physical presence. You are not going to do that, at least not the same way, but you are smart and you notice things. I have seen the changes you have been making to the accounts, the way you have reorganized the work schedules to be more efficient. That is the kind of management that keeps a ranch profitable long term. The men still look at me like I am playing at ranch life. Give them time. Respect is earned out here, and it takes longer for a woman to earn it, which is not fair but is true. Keep showing up, keep learning, keep making smart decisions. They will come around." Wade leaned back in his chair, his profile sharp against the fading light. "And in the meantime, you have got a neighbor who thinks you are doing just fine." Dalton felt warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature spread through her chest. "Thank you, Wade. That means more than you might realize. I mean it." He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "Takes real courage to come out here alone and fight for something everyone tells you to give up on. That is not fragility. That is strength of a kind this country needs more of." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Dalton was not quite ready to name. Then Wade stood, settling his hat back on his head. "I should head out before it gets full dark, but I will be back in a few days to help with moving the herd to the north pasture." Tucker mentioned he was worried about having enough hands. "You do not have to keep coming to help." Dalton stood as well, walking with him to where his horse waited. "You have your own ranch to run." "I know I do not have to, but I want to." Wade swung into the saddle with easy grace, looking down at her with a smile that made her breath catch. "Besides, got to look out for my neighbors, especially the stubborn ones determined to prove everyone wrong." He rode off into the gathering darkness, and Dalton stood on the porch long after he disappeared from view, her mind turning over everything he had said, and more importantly, everything he had left unspoken. The crisis came 3 weeks after Dalton had arrived, when the summer heat was at its most oppressive and tempers were short all around. She woke one morning to raised voices outside and found Tucker arguing with 2 of the ranch hands, both of whom looked ready to ride out. "What is happening?" Dalton asked, joining them despite the fact that she had not yet pinned up her hair or made herself fully presentable. "Miss Fairweather." Tucker looked uncomfortable. "Johnson and Martinez here are giving notice, say they are going to work for the Morrison spread over east. May I ask why?" Dalton addressed the 2 men directly, fighting to keep her voice level. Johnson, a lean man in his 40s with a perpetual squint, shifted his weight. "No offense meant, miss, but the Morrison place is offering better wages and, well, they got a real rancher running things." The implication was clear enough to sting. "I see. And nothing I could offer would change your minds." "It is not personal," Martinez added, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just seems like this place is going to fold once summer really hits and you head back to wherever you came from. Rather get settled somewhere stable." "I am not going anywhere." Dalton heard the steel in her own voice, the anger she had been suppressing for weeks finally finding an outlet. "This is my land, my ranch, and I intend to make it work regardless of how many people think I will fail. If you want to leave, go, but do not pretend it is about wages or stability. It is because you cannot accept taking direction from a woman." Johnson's face flushed red. "Now hold on, no, you hold on." Dalton stepped forward, and to her satisfaction, both men took a half step back. "I have been patient with the doubt and the condescension because I know I have things to learn. But I have also been keeping accounts, and I know that this ranch is more profitable this quarter than it was the same time last year under my uncle's management. I know that the new rotation system I implemented has resulted in healthier cattle. I know that I have negotiated better prices for our supplies by actually reading the contracts instead of just signing them. So if you want to leave because you think a woman cannot run a ranch, fine. But do not insult both of us by pretending it is anything other than what it is." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of hoofbeats. Wade rode into the yard, taking in the tense scene with a quick, assessing glance, having a meeting without inviting the neighbors. He asked lightly, but his eyes were serious as they moved from Dalton's flushed face to the 2 ranch hands. "Johnson and Martinez are leaving," Tucker said. "Going to work for Morrison." "That right." Wade dismounted, looping his reins over the porch rail. Morrison treating his people better these days, because I heard he lost 3 hands last month after refusing to pay them what he owed for extra work. Johnson shifted uncomfortably. He said that was a misunderstanding. I am sure he did. Wade moved to stand beside Dalton, a casual move that nonetheless felt like a statement of allegiance. But you boys do what you think is right. Just seems to me you are making a mistake walking away from a boss who actually cares about running things fair and smart. Morrison cares about profit and nothing else, but like I said, your choice. Easy for you to say, Vaughn, Johnson shot back. You are not working for her. No, but I have been helping out here regular, and I have seen how she handles things. Miss Fairweather knows what she is doing, and she is willing to learn what she does not know. That is more than I can say for a lot of ranchers in this valley, including Morrison. Wade's tone was easy, but there was an edge underneath. And if you are worried about stability, consider that this ranch has been here 20 years and Morrison's has been here 5. Which one you think is more likely to last? Martinez looked uncertain now, glancing between Wade and Dalton. Morrison said, I do not care what Morrison said. Dalton cut him off, some of her anger fading into weariness. If you want to go, go. I will not try to convince you to stay where you do not want to be, but I will need you to work through the end of the week so I can find replacements. We will stay the week, Martinez agreed, nudging Johnson. Come on, let us get to work. The 2 men walked off toward the barn, leaving Tucker to shake his head and mutter something about young fools before following them. Dalton stood frozen, the adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation draining away and leaving her shaky. You all right? Wade asked quietly. I do not know. Dalton wrapped her arms around herself despite the heat. Was I wrong to let them go? Should I have offered more money, tried harder to convince them to stay? No, you handled that exactly right. Wade guided her to the porch chairs, waiting until she sat before taking the seat beside her. Sometimes people are going to leave no matter what you do, especially if they have already made up their minds that you are going to fail. Trying to keep them would have just delayed the inevitable and made you look desperate. I am down 2 hands with Roundup coming. You will find others, and in the meantime, I can spare some time from my place to help out. Have 2 good hands who can manage things for a few days while I work over here. Dalton looked at him, really looked at him, taking in the calm certainty in his face, the way he had ridden in at exactly the right moment, the fact that he kept showing up when she needed someone in her corner. Why do you keep helping me? What do you get out of this? Wade was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on hers. Honestly, at first it was just neighborly obligation. Your uncle helped me when I was getting started, and I figured I owed it to his memory to look out for his niece. But that is not why I keep coming back. Then why? Because somewhere between watching you nearly pass out from heat but refuse to give up, and seeing you stand up to men twice your size who think you do not belong here, I started caring about whether you succeed. Started caring about you, if I am being fully honest. Wade's voice was quiet but sure. I know that is probably not appropriate to say, you being a lady and me just a cowboy trying to make his way, but I do not believe in being dishonest about things that matter. Dalton's heart was beating so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. I care about you too. I think I have since that first day when you caught me and did not treat me like I was made of glass. You have been the only person who seems to believe I can actually do this. Because you can. You are doing it. Wade reached over and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. But that does not mean you have to do it alone. That is what I have been trying to say, I think. You do not have to be strong enough to carry this whole ranch by yourself. Let people help. Let me help. Not because you are weak, but because everyone needs someone in their corner. People will talk. They already think I am failing, If they see you here constantly, they will say I am being propped up by a man, that I am not really running things myself. People are going to talk no matter what you do. That is the nature of small frontier towns where everyone knows everyone's business. Wade gave her hand a gentle squeeze. But you know the truth, and I know the truth. That is what matters. You are the one making the decisions, running the books, managing the operations. I am just an extra set of hands during busy times and someone to talk things through with when you need a sounding board. It feels like more than that. Dalton admitted softly. It is more than that. At least, I hope it is. Wade's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, the gesture both soothing and thrilling. I am not good with fancy words, Dalton, but I know that I ride over here looking for excuses to see you. I know that when I am working my own place. I am thinking about whether you are managing all right in this heat, whether Tucker is giving you the respect you deserve, whether you are getting discouraged. I know that when I imagine the future. You are in it, standing beside me, both of us making a go of it in this hard country. Dalton felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief of being seen, truly seen, for who she was rather than who people expected her to be. They called me too fragile for frontier life. Everyone in Boston said I would never last out here, that I was too delicate, too refined, too weak. Sometimes I worry they are right. Then let me be strong enough for both of us until you realize you are stronger than you think. Wade lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. But I do not think it will take long. You have got steel in your spine, Dalton Fairweather. The desert has not broken you yet, and I do not think it will. They sat together in the growing heat of the morning, hands linked. And for the first time since arriving in California, Dalton felt like maybe, just maybe, she could build a life here. Not the life everyone expected her to give up on, but something better. Something that was entirely hers, with this quiet, steady man beside her. The next weeks passed in a blur of hard work and small victories. Wade was true to his word, spending several days at Dalton's ranch, helping with the daily operations while she searched for reliable hands to replace Johnson and Martinez. He worked alongside Tucker and the remaining men, his presence lending a legitimacy to Dalton's operation that her own management had not yet earned in the eyes of the community. When people saw Wade Vaughn, a respected rancher in his own right, treating Dalton as a capable boss rather than a burden, their attitudes began to shift. Dalton found 2 new ranch hands through the mercantile owner in town, both younger men looking for steady work and willing to take direction from a woman if it meant reliable pay and fair treatment. She interviewed them on the porch while Wade worked in the corrals, and she caught him glancing over periodically, ready to intervene if needed but trusting her to handle her own business. "You are hired," she told the second man, a stocky fellow named Pete with earnest eyes and work-roughened hands. "I expect a full day's work for a full day's pay, but I also expect to treat you fairly. If you have concerns, bring them to me directly. I do not tolerate gossip or insubordination, but I am always willing to listen to reasonable suggestions for improving operations." "Yes, miss. Thank you, miss." Pete looked genuinely grateful for the work, which went a long way toward easing Dalton's concerns about finding good help. As the men went to get settled in the bunkhouse, Wade joined her on the porch, wiping sweat from his face with a bandana. "You have got good instincts for reading people. Those 2 will work out better than Johnson and Martinez ever did. I hope you are right." Dalton handed him a glass of cool water, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Even that small contact sent awareness skittering across her skin. "Tucker says we need to move the herd to the north pasture by the end of the week. The grass is better there this time of year." He is right about that. I just moved mine up there last week. The spring keeps that whole area greener than the rest. Wade drank deeply, then studied her with those perceptive amber eyes. You going to ride along for the move? Should I not? I think you should do whatever you feel ready for. But I will tell you that being there, being visible as the boss during major operations, that goes a long way toward earning respect. Just make sure you are prepared. It is going to be long, hot, dusty days in the saddle. Then I had better practice my riding. Dalton had been taking short rides each morning, building up her endurance and comfort on horseback. She was not a natural rider the way Wade was, easy and graceful in the saddle, but she was learning. Will you be there? Would not miss it. Got a stake in seeing you succeed now. Wade's smile was warm and slightly teasing. Besides, somebody needs to catch you if you start to fall off your horse. That happened one time, and it was because the saddle girth was loose. I know. Just like to see that spark in your eyes when you get riled up. Wade set down his empty glass and reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. You are beautiful when you are fierce. You know that. Dalton felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. Wade Vaughn, are you flirting with me? Yes, miss, I believe I am. That all right with you? More than all right. Dalton stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I keep thinking about what you said, about caring for me, about seeing a future with me in it. I meant every word. I know you did. That is what makes it matter. Dalton reached up to touch his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. I never expected this when I came west. Never expected to find someone who would see past what I cannot do to what I can. Someone who would offer to be strong for both of us without making me feel weak. You are not weak, Dalton. You never were. Wade covered her hand with his, turning his face to press a kiss to her palm. But that does not mean you have to face everything alone. That is what I am trying to tell you. Strength is not about never needing help. It is about being brave enough to accept it when you do. Then I am brave enough for that. With you, I think I could be brave enough for anything. Wade pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in a way that felt both protective and equal, like he was offering shelter without caging her in. Dalton melted into the embrace, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. This, she thought. This is what I was missing back in Boston. Not just a man, but this man who understands that strength comes in many forms. People are definitely going to talk now, Wade murmured against her hair. Let them talk. I am done trying to please people who want to see me fail. Dalton pulled back just enough to look up at him. But we should probably be proper about this. If we are courting, I mean. I do not want to give anyone reason to question my reputation or suggest that you are taking advantage. Courting. Wade smiled, slow and genuine. I like the sound of that. And you are right, we should do this proper. I will call on you regular, take you into town so people see us together respectable like. When the time comes, I will ask you proper, the way a lady deserves. When the time comes for what? For me to ask you to marry me, of course. Wade said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I am not a man who does things halfway, Dalton. When I commit to something, I commit full. And I am committed to you, to us, to building something that lasts. Dalton felt joy bubble up in her chest, bright and effervescent. We have only known each other a few weeks. Known you long enough to know you are who I want, but I am willing to court you proper, give you time to be sure of your own feelings. No rush, just want you to know where I stand. I know where I stand too. Dalton rose on her toes and kissed him, a brief, sweet press of lips that nonetheless felt like a promise. I stand with you, Wade Vaughn, for however long you will have me. That would be forever then. Wade kissed her again, deeper this time, and Dalton felt the last of her doubts about coming west dissolve like morning dew under the desert sun. The cattle drive to the north pasture was every bit as challenging as Wade had warned. Dalton rode out with the men at dawn, dressed in the split riding skirt she had commissioned from the seamstress in town, despite the scandalized looks it had earned. She needed to be able to ride properly, and modesty seemed less important than practicality when dealing with a herd of ornery cattle and miles of rough terrain. Wade stayed close without being obvious about it, riding flank while Dalton positioned herself where she could observe the overall operation. Tucker led the point, directing the flow with hand signals and occasional shouts. The new hands, Pete and the other fellow named Rawlings, proved their worth by working hard without complaint. Even the men who had been skeptical of Dalton's ability to run the ranch seemed to gain new respect as they watched her stick with the drive despite the dust, heat, and exhaustion. By the time they reached the north pasture late that afternoon, Dalton was bone-tired and coated in dust, her face flushed from sun and exertion. But she had stayed in the saddle the entire way, had helped turn back stray cattle, had earned every bit of weariness in her muscles. When Wade helped her dismount, his hands warm and steady on her waist, he was grinning. "You did good today. Real good. I feel like I have been dragged behind my horse rather than riding it." But Dalton was smiling too, feeling a sense of accomplishment she had never experienced in Boston's drawing rooms or at its elegant parties. "That is how you know you worked hard." Tucker rode up, his weathered face approving. "You stuck it out, Miss Fairweather. Not many women could have done that." "Not many people could have done that," Wade corrected mildly. "Gender does not have much to do with grit." Tucker had the grace to look chagrined. "You are right about that. What I meant to say is you proved yourself today, miss. The men saw it too. You have got their respect now, earned honest." "Thank you, Tucker. That means a great deal." Dalton swayed slightly, the exhaustion catching up with her now that the work was done. "Get her home," Tucker told Wade. "We can handle getting the herd settled." Wade did not need to be told twice. He got Dalton back in the saddle, then led both horses at a walking pace back toward her ranch house. The late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, and despite her exhaustion, Dalton found herself appreciating the stark beauty of the landscape that had seemed so hostile just weeks ago. "I am starting to love it here," she said quietly. "This desert country. It is hard and unforgiving, but it is honest. It does not pretend to be anything other than what it is. That is what I have always loved about it too." Wade glanced over at her, his expression soft. "It strips away all the pretense, all the social games. Out here, you are exactly who you are, no more, no less. And who am I, do you think? You are a woman who left everything she knew to claim her own future, who faces down skepticism and hardship with grace and determination, who is strong enough to admit when she needs help but stubborn enough to keep fighting even when everyone says she should quit." Wade reached over and took her hand, linking their fingers together. "You are the woman I am falling in love with, Dalton Fairweather. Hell may be already fallen." Dalton's throat tightened with emotion. "I love you too. I think I started falling that first day when you caught me and did not make me feel ashamed for my weakness. It was not weakness, just your body adjusting to new conditions. You always do that. Reframe things so they sound less like failure and more like learning. Because that is what they are. Failure is only failure if you quit. Everything else is just part of the process." Wade brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "And you are not a quitter, Dalton. That is one of the things I love most about you." They rode in comfortable silence the rest of the way, and when they reached the ranch house, Wade insisted on helping her inside and making sure she drank plenty of water before he left. His concern was touching, made more so by the fact that he never treated her like she was fragile, only like she was precious. "I will be back tomorrow," he promised from the doorway. "We are going into town. I am taking you to dinner at the hotel proper-like, so everyone can see we are courting respectable. You do not have to do that. People already know we spend time together. I want to do it. Want to show you off, honestly. Let the whole town see that you are not some fragile Easterner who is going to fail. You are a rancher who is making a success of her property and who has captured the attention of the luckiest cowboy in California." Wade grinned at her. "Wear something pretty." "I will wear something practical," Dalton countered, but she was smiling. "Pretty does not hold up well in this climate. You could wear a feed sack and still be the prettiest woman in town, but wear whatever makes you feel confident. That is what I want to see." After he left, Dalton drew a cool bath and soaked away the dust and aches of the day. She thought about Wade's words about being strong enough for both of them, and realized that he had been doing exactly that without her even noticing. Not by taking over or diminishing her role, but by being a steady presence she could lean on when needed, a source of encouragement when doubt crept in, a partner who wanted to see her succeed on her own terms. That was what love looked like out here in the hard country, she thought. Not grand gestures or poetic declarations, but showing up day after day, lending strength without expecting anything in return, believing in someone even when they struggled to believe in themselves. The dinner at the hotel was a statement of intent that had the gossips buzzing for days. Wade arrived at Dalton's ranch in a clean shirt and vest, his hair still damp from washing, looking handsome enough to make her breath catch. He helped her into his wagon, which he had fitted with cushions to make the ride more comfortable, and they drove into Mojave with the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant streaks of orange and purple. "You look beautiful," Wade told her, his gaze warm with appreciation. Dalton had chosen a dress in deep green that brought out the color of her eyes, practical enough for the frontier but fine enough for a proper dinner. She had taken care with her hair, pinning it up in a style that was both elegant and secure against the ever-present wind. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Vaughn." "I do try, when the occasion calls for it." The hotel dining room was the finest establishment in Mojave, which was not saying a great deal by Boston standards, but was respectable enough for frontier California. White tablecloths covered sturdy wooden tables, oil lamps provided warm light, and the menu offered actual choices rather than whatever the cook had decided to make that day. Every head in the room turned when they entered, and Dalton felt the weight of curious stares, heard the whispers that always seemed to follow her in town. Wade either did not notice or did not care. He escorted her to a table with pride, holding her chair and treating her with a courtly respect that made it clear this was more than two neighbors sharing a meal. This was courtship, public and intentional, and anyone watching could see it. "Let them stare," Wade said quietly as he took his own seat. "They are just jealous that I got to you first." "Is that what happened? You got to me first," Dalton teased, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "Well, I certainly was not going to let some other cowboy swoop in and steal your heart. Had to stake my claim early." "I am not a piece of land to be claimed, Wade Vaughn. No, you are not. You are a woman who gets to make her own choices, and I am just hoping you will keep choosing me." The sincerity in his voice took the edge off the possessive language, made it clear he was joking about the claiming but serious about the hoping. They ordered dinner and talked easily, the conversation flowing from ranch business to books Dalton had brought from Boston to Wade's plans for expanding his own herd. He asked her opinion on things, listened when she spoke, built on her ideas rather than dismissing them. It was the kind of partnership, Dalton had never dared hope for back east, where men wanted ornamental wives who would reflect their status but never challenge their authority. "My father would have liked you," Dalton said suddenly, the thought occurring to her as Wade told a story about a particularly stubborn bull he had wrestled with last spring. "He always said that character was more important than status, that a man should be judged by his actions rather than his bank account. My mother never forgave him for that philosophy. She married him expecting a traditional society life, and instead he spent his money on charitable works and treated everyone from bankers to street sweepers with equal respect. Sounds like a good man. He was. He died when I was 19, and I think my mother breathed a sigh of relief. She could finally stop pretending to approve of his eccentricities." Dalton surprised herself with the bitterness in her voice. "She spent the next few years trying to marry me off to suitable men, which in her definition meant wealthy and traditional. I resisted, which she said was me being difficult. Really, I was just waiting for someone who reminded me of my father, someone with character and conviction. And you think I fit that description. I know you do. You are the kind of man my father would have respected, Wade. The kind of man he would have been proud to see me with." Wade reached across the table and took her hand, right there in the middle of the dining room where anyone could see. "Then I am honored to live up to his memory. And I promise you, Dalton, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the faith you are putting in me. You already are worthy. That is what I have been trying to tell you." The meal passed in a glow of warmth and connection, and by the time they left the hotel, Dalton felt like she was walking on air. Wade drove her home under a canopy of stars so bright and numerous they took her breath away. The Milky Way splashed across the sky in a way she had never seen back east, where city lights dimmed the heavens. "I will never get used to this sky," she whispered, not wanting to break the peaceful silence of the desert night. "It is like the universe is showing off. One of the things I love most about this country, no matter how hard the day was, the night always offers something beautiful." Wade pulled the wagon to a stop in front of her house, then turned to face her fully. "Dalton, I know we have not been courting long. I know by society standards I should wait longer, be more proper about this. But I am not much for following rules when my heart is telling me something different." Dalton's pulse quickened. "What is your heart telling you? That you are it for me. That I have found the person I want to build a life with, and waiting is not going to change that. I am not asking you to marry me tonight," Wade added quickly, seeing her eyes widen. "I will do that proper when the time is right, but I am telling you now that I am all in. Completely committed. If you will have me, I am yours for as long as you want me. I want you for always." Dalton leaned in and kissed him, putting all her feelings into the press of lips, the way her hand came up to cup his face, the way she poured months of loneliness and weeks of falling in love into this single moment. Wade kissed her back with equal fervor, his arms coming around her to pull her close despite the awkwardness of the wagon seat. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to marry you, Dalton Fairweather. Going to stand up in front of the whole town and claim you as my wife. And anyone who ever called you too fragile for this life will have to eat their words when they see us building something that lasts. I will hold you to that promise, Cowboy. I am counting on it." The next months passed in a pattern of work, courtship, and gradual acceptance by the community. Dalton's ranch prospered under her careful management and Wade's frequent assistance. The cattle were healthy, the operations efficient, and by the time fall arrived with its slightly cooler temperatures, even the most skeptical ranchers in the valley had to admit that Miss Fairweather was making a success of her uncle's legacy. Wade continued to court her properly, calling regularly, taking her to town events, making sure everyone knew his intentions were honorable and permanent. But he also continued to work beside her, teaching her the skills she needed to run the ranch independently, while never making her feel incompetent for not knowing them already. Under his patient instruction, Dalton learned to rope, to read weather patterns, to judge the quality of cattle by sight and touch. She grew stronger physically, her body adapting to the demands of ranch life, her pale skin taking on a light tan that would have horrified her mother, but that made her feel connected to this desert country she was learning to love. Tucker warmed to her as he saw her dedication and growing competence. The ranch hands, both old and new, began bringing their concerns and suggestions to her directly rather than filtering everything through Tucker or waiting for Wade to arrive. She earned their trust one decision at a time, proving that she valued their input while maintaining final authority over her own property. The town was slower to accept her, but that too began to change. The ladies of Mojave, who had initially treated her with polite skepticism, began inviting her to their charitable committees and social gatherings. They saw that she was not some temporary Easterner playing at ranch life, but a woman committed to making California her permanent home. When Dalton helped organize a community barn raising for a family whose structure had burned down, working alongside the men in practical clothing and proving she was not afraid to get her hands dirty, she crossed some invisible threshold of acceptance. "You have become one of us," the mercantile owner's wife told her one afternoon as they worked together preparing food for the harvest festival. "When you first arrived, we thought you would last maybe a month before running back to Boston, but you proved us wrong, Miss Fairweather. You are frontier stock now, whether you were born to it or not." It was one of the finest compliments Dalton had ever received, better than any praise for her accomplishments in Boston society. This was earned acceptance, based on her actions rather than her family connections or wealth. As autumn deepened into early winter, Wade began making plans that extended beyond the next season. He talked about combining their properties, about building a house that sat between their two ranches, about long-term strategies for breeding better cattle and managing water resources. He talked about a future that included children learning to ride across these golden hills, about growing old together while watching their ranching operation become one of the most successful in the valley. "You are getting ahead of yourself," Dalton teased one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. "You still have not actually asked me to marry you. I have not found the right moment yet." Wade pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders as she leaned into his warmth. "Want it to be perfect, something you will remember for the rest of your life. I will remember it regardless of when or how you ask, but I appreciate the thought you are putting into it. You deserve the best I can give you, Dalton. That includes a proper proposal." The moment came a week before Christmas, on a day when the desert was experiencing one of its rare cold snaps, the temperature dropping low enough that everyone wore coats and the morning air held an actual chill. Wade had asked Dalton to ride out to the boundary between their properties, claiming he wanted to show her something about the fence line that needed attention before spring. Dalton bundled up and met him as requested, finding him waiting with both horses already saddled. They rode out together, following the fence line that marked where her land ended and his began. The landscape rolled away in all directions, all golden grass and blue sky, beautiful in its stark simplicity. "Here," Wade said, stopping at a spot where a massive old oak tree stood sentinel, one of the few substantial trees in this part of the valley. "This is the place." "What place?" Dalton dismounted, looking around curiously. "The fence looks fine to me." "It is fine." "I lied about that being why I brought you out here." Wade dismounted as well, then took her hands in his, holding them gently. "This tree marks the exact center point between our two properties. If you stand right here, you are equally on your land and mine." Seemed like the right spot for what I want to ask you. Dalton's heart began to race. "Wade, let me say this before I lose my nerve." Wade's smile was slightly nervous, which was endearing on a man usually so confident. "Dalton Fairweather, I love you. I love your strength and your stubborn determination. I love how you prove everyone wrong just by being yourself. I love waking up knowing I get to see you that day, and I hate the nights when I have to ride back to my place instead of staying by your side. I want to combine our ranches and our lives. I want to build a house right here under this tree, equal parts yours and mine, a home we create together. I want to have children with you and teach them that strength comes in many forms. I want to grow old beside you, facing down whatever challenges this hard country throws at us. So I am asking you, proper and respectful, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner, and the person I get to love for the rest of my life?" Tears were streaming down Dalton's face, but she was smiling through them. "Yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to marrying you and building a life together and creating something that lasts. Yes to being your partner in every way that matters. Yes, Wade Vaughn, I will absolutely marry you." Wade let out a whoop of joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around under the oak tree while she laughed and cried and held on to him. When he set her down, he pulled a small box from his coat pocket, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the winter sunlight. "It was my grandmother's," he explained as he slid it onto her finger. "Only valuable thing my family had. She gave it to my mother with instructions to pass it to whoever I chose to marry. She said the right woman would understand that the value was in the commitment, not the size of the stone. It is perfect." Dalton held up her hand, watching the diamond sparkle. "I will treasure it always, not because of what it is worth, but because of what it represents. Your family's legacy and our future combined. We should head back and tell people. Tucker will want to know. Hell, the whole town will want to know. Biggest gossip in weeks will be Wade Vaughn finally getting Dalton Fairweather to agree to marry him. They will probably say you are marrying me for my ranch." Dalton said it lightly, but there was an edge of old hurt underneath. "Then they are fools. I am marrying you because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. The fact that you happen to own a fine piece of property adjacent to mine is just a bonus." Wade kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. "Besides, everyone knows you run your ranch better than I run mine. If anything, you are the one marrying down." "That is absolutely not true, and you know it." "Maybe not, but the point is we are partners, equal partners building something together. That is what matters." They rode back to Dalton's ranch hand in hand, an awkward arrangement on horseback, but one they managed through sheer determination not to let go of each other. Tucker took one look at their faces and started grinning. "About time you made it official," he said, shaking Wade's hand and then, surprising everyone including himself, pulling Dalton into a brief hug. "You two are good together. Your uncle would have approved, miss." He always liked Wade, said he had the kind of character that was rare in young men these days. "That means a lot, Tucker. Thank you." The news spread through Mojave faster than a wildfire through dry grass. By the time Dalton and Wade made it into town the next day, everyone seemed to know about the engagement and had opinions about it. Most were congratulatory, pleased to see two hard-working ranchers finding happiness together. A few were skeptical, suggesting that Wade was making a mistake tying himself to a woman who was still, despite her successes, an outsider and a potential liability. Pay them no mind. the mercantile owner's wife advised when Dalton stopped in to order supplies. Some people would complain if you served them champagne and caviar, saying the bubbles were too sharp and the fish eggs too salty. You and Wade are well matched. Anyone with eyes can see that. They planned a spring wedding, wanting to give themselves time to prepare and to wait for the worst of winter to pass. Wade began construction on the house under the oak tree, hiring carpenters and working alongside them whenever he could spare time from ranch duties. Dalton helped design the interior, insisting on practical features that would make the house functional for ranch life, while also including touches of beauty that made it a home rather than just a shelter. "I want a big kitchen," she told Wade as they reviewed the plans one evening. "Somewhere I can cook for the family, but also prepare meals for ranch hands during busy seasons. And a study where we can keep the account books and maps, somewhere we can work together on planning and decisions. And a porch that wraps around two sides, so we can sit out on summer evenings and watch the sunset no matter which direction offers the best view." Wade added his own requirements, plus enough bedrooms for the children we are going to have. "How many children are you planning on exactly?" "As many as you will give me. I grew up an only child and I always wished for siblings. Want our kids to have brothers and sisters to rely on. Then, we had better make this house big enough to accommodate a growing family." The winter passed in a flurry of preparation and anticipation. Dalton continued running her ranch with increased confidence, now secure in the knowledge that she had proven herself to the community and earned their respect. Wade divided his time between his property, hers, and the construction site, somehow managing to keep all three ventures running smoothly. They saw each other daily, sometimes working side by side, other times just stealing a few minutes to talk and plan their future. The wedding was set for late April, when the desert would be at its most beautiful, the wildflowers blooming in response to the winter rains and the temperatures mild enough for a comfortable outdoor celebration. Dalton invited her mother out of obligation, but was not surprised when she declined, citing the difficulty of travel and her disapproval of Dalton's choices. It stung less than it might have a year ago. Dalton had built a new family here in California, one based on mutual respect and shared values rather than blood relation and social expectations. "She does not know what she is missing," Wade said when Dalton shared her mother's response. "Her loss is my gain, and I am grateful for it every single day. I wish she could see that I am happy, truly happy, in a way I never was back in Boston. I wish she could understand that strength does not always look the way we expect it to. Maybe someday she will. But even if she does not, you do not need her approval. You have built something real here, Dalton. Something that matters." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the sky a perfect blue dome overhead and the temperature hovering in the comfortable range that made desert springs so lovely. They held the ceremony under the oak tree where Wade had proposed, with a preacher from town officiating, and what seemed like the entire population of Mojave in attendance. Dalton wore a dress she had commissioned from a seamstress in Los Angeles, cream-colored silk, with practical lines and beautiful lace detail. A perfect blend of elegance and frontier sensibility. Wade wore a new suit that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable, his usual ease in his body constrained by the formal clothing. But when he saw Dalton walking toward him on Tucker's arm, the old foreman giving her away in place of her absent father, his face transformed with such obvious love and awe that half the women in attendance sighed. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," Wade whispered as she joined him under the tree. "And you are the answer to prayers I did not know how to pray." Dalton took his hands, feeling the rough calluses that came from honest work, the strength that had been there to catch her when she fell and lift her up when she stumbled. The preacher led them through traditional vows, the words made meaningful by the sincerity with which they spoke them. When it came time to say, "I do," both answered without hesitation, their voices clear and strong. Wade slid a matching gold band onto Dalton's finger, and she did the same for him, the ring's simple but significant symbols of commitment. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Wade pulled Dalton into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, not caring that they had an audience, making it clear to everyone watching that this was a marriage based on genuine love and passion. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, and when they finally broke apart, both were grinning. "Mrs. Vaughn," Wade said, testing out her new name. "I like the sound of that. I like being it." Dalton squeezed his hands. "Though I will be keeping Fairweather for ranch business, I have worked too hard to establish that name to abandon it now." "Fair enough. Mrs. Dalton Fairweather Vaughn, then." A woman with enough name to cover both ranches. The celebration that followed was everything a frontier wedding should be. Loud, joyous, and filled with good food, decent whiskey, and dancing that went on until well after dark. Dalton danced with Wade, with Tucker, with several of the ranch hands who awkwardly asked for the honor, and even with the mercantile owner who pronounced her a fine addition to the community. She felt embraced by these people who had been skeptical strangers just months ago, accepted fully as one of their own. As the party wound down and guests began heading home, Wade scooped Dalton up in his arms, carrying her toward their new house despite her laughing protests. "Wade Vaughn, put me down. I can walk." "I know you can, but this is tradition, carrying the bride over the threshold, and I have been waiting months to carry you into our home as my wife." He set her down gently inside the house, which was finished enough to be livable even if some of the interior work remained incomplete. Furniture had been moved in over the past week, a combination of pieces from both their previous homes, and someone, probably Tucker and the hands, had decorated with wildflowers and lit lanterns that cast warm light throughout the space. "It is perfect," Dalton said softly, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "Our home, built exactly where your land and mine meet, a perfect representation of our partnership, built on a foundation of respect and love which is the only kind that lasts." Wade came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "I love you, Dalton. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who fell in love with your strength. Thank you for seeing strength where everyone else saw fragility. For offering to be strong enough for both of us until I realized I was stronger than I thought." Dalton turned in his arms, reaching up to cup his face. "You saved me, Wade. Not from the frontier, but from a life where I would have always been trying to fit into spaces too small for who I really am. You saved me, too. From a life that would have been fine but never extraordinary. You make everything brighter, Dalton. Everything better." They kissed in the soft lamplight of their new home, surrounded by the promise of the future they would build together. And Dalton thought about the terrified young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Mojave all those months ago. That woman had been afraid of failure, afraid of proving everyone right who said she was too fragile for frontier life. But she had found something more important than proving people wrong. She had found herself, her own strength, her own capacity for courage and love, and building something that mattered. The first year of marriage was a period of adjustment and growth, learning to navigate life as partners while maintaining their individual strengths. They combined their ranching operations officially, filing the paperwork that made them equal owners of both properties. Dalton proved to have a genius for the business side of ranching, negotiating better prices for their cattle and finding new markets for their goods. Wade excelled at the practical side, managing the herds and the land with an intuition born of years of experience. Together, they built something more successful than either could have achieved alone. The first real test of their partnership came during a brutal summer drought when water became scarce and tensions ran high among the ranchers in the valley. Several of the larger outfits tried to claim more than their share of the limited water resources, arguing that their size and economic importance gave them priority. Wade was ready to fight, to protect their water rights with force if necessary, but Dalton convinced him to try a different approach. "Violence will only lead to more violence," she argued during a tense evening discussion. "Let me call a meeting of all the ranchers. We will sit down and work out a fair distribution based on need and legal rights, not on who can intimidate whom. They will not listen to you. Hell, half of them still think a woman has no business running a ranch. Then I will make them listen, and you will be there beside me, supporting my authority. That is what partnership means, Wade. We use different strengths for different situations." The meeting was contentious, with several ranchers initially dismissing Dalton's suggestions out of hand. But she had come prepared with legal documentation, historical water usage records, and a detailed plan that ensured everyone got enough to keep their operations viable. More importantly, she appealed to their sense of community rather than individual greed. "We all depend on this valley," she told the assembled ranchers, her voice calm but firm. "If we tear each other apart over water, none of us will survive. But if we work together, share resources fairly, we can all make it through this drought. That is what frontier communities are supposed to do, support each other through hard times." It was Wade who broke the silence that followed, standing up to add his voice to hers. "Miss Dalton, Mrs. Vaughn, my wife is right, and anyone who knows me knows I do not say that just because I am her husband. She is right because her plan makes sense, because it is fair, and because it is the only way we all survive this. I am voting to accept her distribution plan. Who is with me?" One by one, the other ranchers agreed, some grudgingly, others with genuine respect. By the end of the meeting, they had a system in place that would see the whole community through the drought. And Dalton had earned a new level of respect, not as Wade Vaughn's wife, but as a skilled negotiator and leader in her own right. "You were magnificent," Wade told her on the ride home, pride evident in his voice. "Watching you convince that room full of stubborn cowboys to see reason was like watching an artist at work. I had a good teacher. You showed me that strength is not about dominating others, but about bringing people together toward common goals." Dalton leaned against his shoulder, tired but satisfied. "We make a good team, you and I. The best team, and we are just getting started." The drought ended with heavy rains that fall, and by the time winter arrived, the valley was green and prosperous again. Dalton and Wade's combined ranch was thriving, their herd growing, their reputation as fair and innovative ranchers spreading beyond the immediate area. They hired additional hands, including 2 young men who reminded Dalton of herself, full of determination but short on experience, needing guidance rather than dismissal. She took them under her wing, teaching them the same lessons Wade had taught her about working smart rather than just working hard. It was in the spring of their second year of marriage that Dalton realized she was pregnant. She told Wade one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, the same ritual they had shared since before they were married. "I am going to have a baby." She said it simply, watching his face for his reaction. Wade went very still, then turned to stare at her with wide eyes. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be. The doctor in town confirmed it yesterday when I went in for supplies. We are going to have a baby. Wade repeated the words like he was testing them out, then suddenly grinned so wide Dalton thought his face might split. We are going to have a baby. He scooped her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. This is the best news, the very best news. I am glad you think so. I was worried you might think it was too soon, that we should have waited longer. Too soon, Dalton, we have been planning for this since before we got married. This is exactly what we wanted. Wade set her down carefully, suddenly treating her like she was made of glass. You need to rest. Put your feet up. Should you even be working at the ranch? Is it safe, Wade Vaughn? Do not you dare start treating me like I am fragile now. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, and most of them keep working right up until their due date. I am pregnant, not incapacitated. I know, just you are carrying my child, our child. I want to make sure you are both safe and healthy. We will be fine. But I appreciate the concern. Dalton took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. By next winter there will be 3 of us. Are you ready for that? I have been ready since the day I met you. Wade leaned in to kiss her, gentle and reverent. Thank you for this gift. For agreeing to build a family with me. Thank you for being the kind of man I want to build a family with. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Dalton had to admit the desert heat was more oppressive than ever as summer arrived and her body changed. Wade fussed over her constantly, trying to do her share of the work in addition to his own, until she had to sit him down for a firm talk about not trying to protect her from normal pregnancy discomforts. I am not sick, Wade. I am just pregnant. Let me do my job. But what if you overdo it? What if something happens? Then we will deal with it. But wrapping me in cotton wool is not going to keep me or the baby safer. It will just drive me insane and make me resent the very care you are trying to show. Dalton softened her tone, seeing the genuine fear in his eyes. I know you are worried, but you have to trust me to know my own limits, to ask for help when I need it. That is what being partners means, trusting each other. Wade nodded slowly. You are right. I am sorry, just the thought of anything happening to you, I know, but nothing is going to happen. We are going to have a healthy baby and raise them to be strong and kind, and to know that strength comes in many forms, just like we planned. The baby arrived on a cold December night, earlier than expected but not dangerously so. The doctor arrived from town just in time, and Wade paced the floor outside their bedroom while Dalton labored with the help of the doctor and 2 women from town who had experience with births. It was long and painful and terrifying and miraculous all at once, and when the baby's first cry split the air, Wade burst through the door despite being told to wait. Is Dalton all right? Is the baby all right? Both fine, the doctor assured him. You have a son, Wade, a healthy baby boy. Wade made it to the bedside in 2 strides, looking down at Dalton's exhausted, radiant face and the tiny bundle she held in her arms. A son, he whispered, awe evident in his voice. We have a son. We do. Come meet your boy. Dalton shifted the baby so Wade could see him properly. A red, squalling little thing with dark hair and surprisingly strong lungs. What should we name him? I was thinking Thomas, after your father, Tom for short. Wade reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand, marveling when miniature fingers wrapped around his thumb. That all right with you? Perfect. Thomas Wade Vaughn. A strong name for what I hope will be a strong man. Dalton looked up at her husband, seeing tears tracking down his face. We did it, Wade. We built a family. You did the hard part. All I did was pace and worry. You did more than that. You built a home for him, a safe place where he can grow up knowing he is loved and valued. That is everything. Little Thomas settled into their lives with the kind of upheaval that all new parents experience. Sleepless nights, constant feedings, the anxiety that comes with being responsible for a helpless human being. But he also brought joy unlike anything Dalton had imagined, a fierce love that made her understand her own capacity for devotion in new ways. Wade was a devoted father, helping with everything from diaper changes to midnight feedings, treating fatherhood as seriously as he treated ranching. "He is going to know his father was fully present," Wade said one night as he rocked Thomas back to sleep after a feeding. "Not one of those men who thinks raising children is women's work. He is lucky to have you. We both are." Dalton watched them from the bed, her heart full to bursting with love for these two males who had become her entire world. The years that followed brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management, becoming one of the most successful operations in the valley. They added 2 more children to their family, a daughter named Lily after Wade's grandmother 2 years after Thomas, and another son they called James 3 years after that. The house under the oak tree rang with the sounds of children growing up strong and wild, learning to ride almost before they could walk, understanding from their earliest days that this harsh desert country required respect and adaptation. Dalton never forgot what it felt like to be called too fragile, to have people doubt her capacity to survive in this environment. She made sure her children, especially her daughter, grew up knowing that strength came in many forms, that being smart and adaptable was just as valuable as being physically tough. She taught them to read the land, to respect the desert's power, to work hard but also to ask for help when they needed it. Wade taught them practical skills: how to rope and ride, how to read animal behavior, how to judge weather and water sources. But he also taught them empathy, showing them by example that a real man was not afraid to be gentle, to help others, to admit when he was wrong. Together, they raised children who were both tough enough to survive the frontier and kind enough to make it a better place. Tucker stayed on as foreman until his health declined, and when he finally retired, he told Dalton that watching her prove everyone wrong had been one of the great privileges of his life. "You were something special, Mrs. Vaughn, I mean. Never saw anyone fight harder to earn respect, and never saw anyone more deserving of it once earned." The town of Mojave grew and changed over the years, becoming more settled, more civilized, slowly shedding its rough frontier edges. Dalton and Wade became pillars of the community, known for their fair dealing, their willingness to help neighbors in need, and their progressive attitudes about what women could accomplish. When younger women arrived in town, unsure if they could make a life in this harsh country, Dalton made a point of reaching out, of sharing her own story, of offering the encouragement and support she wished she had received when she first arrived. "You are stronger than you think," she told one young woman who reminded her painfully of herself at 23. "This land will test you, but it will not break you unless you let it, and you do not have to face it alone. That is what community is for." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade took Dalton back to the oak tree where they had married, where their house still stood as testament to their partnership. The tree had grown in the intervening years, its branches spreading wider, providing more shade. Carved into the trunk were their initials, put there by Wade on their first anniversary, a permanent mark of their presence in this landscape. 10 years, Wade said, pulling Dalton close as they stood under the branches. 10 years of marriage, 15 years since you stepped off that stagecoach looking lost and determined and beautiful. Best 15 years of my life. Mine too. Though I did not think so at the time. I was so scared, Wade. So sure I was going to fail and have to slink back to Boston with my tail between my legs. But you did not fail. You built something amazing. We built something amazing. We did. And we are not done yet. I have been thinking there is so much more we could do with the ranch, with the community. I want to start a school, make sure all the children in the valley have access to education, not just the ones in town. I want to help establish a lending library. I want Wade laughed and kissed her, cutting off the flow of plans and dreams. I know you do, and we will. We will do all of it, because that is who we are. People who build things, who make the world better. But right now, in this moment, I just want to stand here with my wife and be grateful for everything we have. I can do that. Be grateful and present, though I am still going to plan the school. I would not expect anything less. Wade rested his forehead against hers, his arms secure around her waist. I love you, Dalton Fairweather Vaughn. I loved you when you were struggling to prove yourself. I loved you when you were building your confidence. I love you now as an accomplished rancher and mother and the strongest woman I know. And I will love you until the day I die and beyond. That is a lot of love for someone everyone called too fragile for this life. Good thing I said I would be strong enough for both of us then. Though it turned out I did not need to be. You were always strong enough on your own. Maybe, but it helped having you there, being my foundation when I needed one, my partner when I was ready for one. Dalton pulled back to look up at him, seeing the same love and respect in his eyes that had been there from the beginning. Thank you for catching me that first day and never letting go. Best decision I ever made, catching you and never letting go. They stood together under the oak tree, surrounded by the desert they had both learned to love, and watched the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple that painted the whole sky. 3 children played in the distance, their laughter carrying on the dry wind. The ranch stretched out around them, thousands of acres of hard-won success. And in that moment, Dalton felt the deep satisfaction of knowing she had built exactly the life she was meant to live. She was not the fragile Eastern girl anymore, if she ever really had been. She was a rancher, a wife, a mother, a leader in her community. She was someone who had taken every doubt and dismissal and turned it into fuel for proving that strength came in forms most people never thought to recognize. She was someone who had found love in the hard country, who had built a partnership based on mutual respect and shared dreams. She was exactly who she was meant to be, standing exactly where she was meant to stand, loved by a man who had seen her strength when everyone else saw fragility. The years continued to unfold with all the complexity and richness of a life fully lived. Thomas grew into a young man with his father's steady nature and his mother's keen intelligence, taking naturally to ranch management and innovation. He was 17 when he suggested they try breeding a hardier strain of cattle better suited to desert conditions, showing the same forward-thinking approach that had made his parents successful. Lily at 15 was proving to be a skilled negotiator, able to get better prices at market than even her mother, with a charm that masked sharp business instincts. James, the youngest at 12, had his father's way with animals and could gentle the most skittish horse with patience and quiet confidence. Watching them grow and thrive filled Dalton with a satisfaction she had never anticipated. These children had grown up knowing their mother ran a ranch as competently as any man, had watched their father treat her as an equal partner, had learned from birth that strength and capability were not determined by gender, but by character and determination. They would carry those lessons into their own futures, making the frontier a more equitable place simply by existing in it with those values ingrained. The ranch itself had grown beyond what either Dalton or Wade had imagined that first year. They now ran over 500 head of cattle across their combined properties, employed a dozen full-time ranch hands, and served as a model for progressive ranching practices throughout California. Other ranchers came to them for advice, asking about their breeding programs, their water management systems, their efficient operations that balanced profitability with sustainability. Never thought when I was struggling to prove I deserved to be here that I would end up being sought out for my expertise. Dalton remarked to Wade one evening as they reviewed contracts for a large cattle sale. They sat together in the study they had designed so many years ago, working side by side as they always had. "I am not surprised at all. You have always been the smartest person in any room. Just took everyone else time to figure it out." Wade signed his name to a document and passed it to her for her signature. "Though I will admit I love that we sign everything together now. Joint owners, joint decision makers, joint everything. That is what partnership means, something you understood from the beginning." Dalton added her signature, noting how their names looked together on the page. Wade Vaughn and Dalton Fairweather Vaughn, equal partners in every sense. The state of California was changing rapidly as the 1890s approached, becoming less wild, more settled. The railroad had brought easier transportation and expanded markets. Towns were growing into small cities. The rough edges of frontier life were being smoothed away by civilization's steady advance. Dalton had mixed feelings about these changes. Part of her mourned the passing of the wild desert country that had tested and forged her into who she had become. But another part recognized that progress brought opportunities, especially for women who wanted to claim space traditionally denied them. She used her own success and reputation to advocate for other women, writing letters to politicians about property rights, and speaking at community gatherings about the importance of education for girls. When the territorial legislature debated a measure about married women's property rights, Dalton traveled to Sacramento to testify, bringing Wade along not as her spokesman but as her supporter. "My husband and I have operated as equal partners for over a decade," she told the assembled legislators, her voice clear and confident. "He has never tried to claim my property as his own, has never dismissed my judgment, has never suggested that my gender makes me less capable of managing our joint holdings. That should be the norm, not the exception. Women should have the same rights to own and control property regardless of their marital status. It is not only fair, it is good business. Some of the most successful ranchers I know are women who have been given the chance to prove their capabilities." The measure passed, in part due to her testimony and that of other women who had been invited to speak. Wade squeezed her hand as they left the legislative building, pride evident in his face. "You did it. Actually helped change the law. We did it. You were there beside me, lending your support and credibility. That partnership is what made the difference." Dalton leaned against him as they walked. "I keep thinking about that scared girl who arrived in Mojave all those years ago. She would never believe she would end up here, testifying before the legislature, helping change laws. That girl was always this woman. She just needed the chance to prove it and maybe someone to believe in her while she figured it out." Wade hailed a carriage to take them back to their hotel. "What do you want to do next? Because I know you, Dalton. You are already planning the next project." "I want to establish a scholarship fund for young women who want to pursue education beyond what is available in small frontier towns. Help them go to college, learn skills, come back and make their communities better." Dalton had been thinking about this for months, refining the idea. "I had advantages, even if my family did not approve of how I used them. I was educated, had some money, had options. Many girls out here do not have those things. I want to change that. Then that is what we will do. I will help however I can." They spent 3 more days in Sacramento, meeting with other progressive ranchers and business owners, making connections that would help with Dalton's educational fund and other projects. By the time they returned home, Dalton had commitments from 5 other wealthy families to contribute to the scholarship fund, and a plan for how to administer it fairly. The children were thrilled to have them home, full of stories about everything that had happened in their absence. Thomas had successfully handled a difficult situation with a supplier, negotiating better terms without his parents' intervention. Lily had organized the ranch hands to complete a week's worth of work in 3 days through clever scheduling. James had gentled a particularly stubborn colt that everyone else had given up on. They were growing into capable adults, ready to take on more responsibility. "They are going to be fine," Wade said that night as he and Dalton prepared for bed. "Better than fine. They are going to be extraordinary because they had you as an example. They had both of us. You taught them just as much as I did. Maybe. But you showed them what is possible when you refuse to accept limitations others try to place on you. That is a powerful lesson, Dalton. One that will serve them their entire lives." As Dalton settled into bed beside her husband, surrounded by the life they had built through determination, partnership, and love, she thought about all the people who had called her too fragile for frontier life. She wondered what they would say if they could see her now. A successful rancher, a devoted mother, an advocate for change, a woman who had not only survived the harsh desert country but thrived in it beyond anyone's expectations. But mostly she thought about Wade, who had looked at her that first day when she was at her weakest and seen strength waiting to be realized, who had offered to be strong enough for both of them while she found her footing, then stepped back to let her stand on her own when she was ready, who had loved her through uncertainty and success, through challenges and triumphs, through every stage of becoming who she was meant to be. "Thank you," she whispered in the darkness, "not for the first time and certainly not for the last." "For what?" Wade pulled her close, his body warm and familiar against hers. "For everything. For seeing me when I could not see myself. For believing in me when I was not sure I believed in myself. For being the partner I needed and the man I wanted. For building this life with me. That goes both ways, you know. You saved me too. From a life that would have been fine but never extraordinary, you made everything better, Dalton. Everything brighter and more meaningful. So thank you right back." They drifted to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the love they had built and the future that stretched before them. Outside, the desert night wrapped around their house, the same harsh country that had tested Dalton so severely all those years ago. But she was no longer afraid of it. She had learned its rhythms, adapted to its demands, found beauty in its starkness. She had become part of it, as much a fixture of this landscape as the ancient oak tree that sheltered their home. The scholarship fund launched the following spring with a celebration that brought people from all over the valley. Dalton announced the first 3 recipients, young women who had demonstrated academic promise and determination despite limited resources. She made sure to include in her speech a reminder that strength came in many forms, that these young women were not fragile flowers needing protection, but capable individuals deserving opportunity. "I was told I was too fragile for frontier life," she said to the assembled crowd. "That I should give up and return to the safety of Eastern civilization. But I had someone who told me he would be strong enough for both of us until I realized my own strength. That made all the difference." So to these young women receiving scholarships, and to anyone else who has been told they are not tough enough or strong enough or whatever enough to achieve their dreams, I say this: find people who believe in you, work hard, adapt to challenges rather than running from them, and never let anyone else define your limitations. You are stronger than you know. You just need the chance to prove it. The applause was thunderous, and Dalton saw Wade standing at the edge of the crowd with their 3 children, all of them clapping and smiling with pride. That image stayed with her long after the celebration ended. Her family, strong and healthy and happy, living proof that she had built something lasting in this hard country. Years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes that time always brings. Dalton's hair developed streaks of silver that she wore proudly as evidence of a life fully lived. Wade's face gained more lines, weathered by sun and wind but still handsome to her eyes. Their children grew into adults, with Thomas eventually taking over much of the day-to-day ranch operations, Lily becoming a force in California politics and business, and James establishing his own horse breeding program that became renowned throughout the West. They became grandparents, watching a new generation of children run across the same land where their own children had played. Dalton taught her granddaughters the same lessons she had taught Lily about not accepting limitations based on gender. Wade taught his grandsons that strength included gentleness, that real men were not afraid to be kind and supportive. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the town of Mojave threw them a celebration, recognizing their contributions not just to the local economy, but to the community's character. Person after person stood up to share stories about how Wade and Dalton had helped them, had offered encouragement or assistance during difficult times, had modeled what a true partnership looked like. "I remember when Miss Fairweather first arrived," the mercantile owner said, now elderly but still sharp. "We all thought she would last maybe a month. She proved us all wrong, and in doing so, she showed us that our assumptions about what women could and could not do were just that, assumptions. She changed this town for the better just by being herself and refusing to quit." Dalton stood to thank everyone, Wade beside her as always. "I did not do any of this alone. I had a partner who believed in me, who supported me, who shared the burdens and the triumphs equally. That is what I want people to remember. We are all stronger when we work together, when we see each other's potential, rather than focusing on assumed limitations." Wade offered to be strong enough for both of us, but it turned out we were both strong enough when we combined our strengths. That is the lesson of our marriage and our lives together. As they drove home that evening, the desert sunset painting the sky in the brilliant colors Dalton had come to love, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from terrified newcomer to respected community elder. It had not been easy. There had been moments of doubt, times when she wanted to give up, challenges that seemed insurmountable. But she had persevered, supported by a man who saw her true worth and a land that had tested her but ultimately embraced her. No regrets. Wade asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Not a single one. This life, this partnership, these children and grandchildren, everything we have built together, it is exactly what I was meant to do. I just did not know it until I got here and met you. Same. I was content before you arrived, but I was not fully alive. You brought color and purpose and meaning to everything, made me better than I was. We made each other better. That is what love does when it is real and right." They spent that evening on their porch, the same porch where they had shared so many sunsets over the years, holding hands and watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The desert breathed around them, hot wind carrying the scent of sage and dust and all the memories of the years they had spent in this place. "You ever miss Boston?" Wade asked suddenly. "The life you left behind?" "Not even a little bit. That life was never really mine. It was the life my mother wanted for me, the life society expected. This life, out here in the hard country with you, this is the life I chose, the life I built, the life I love." Dalton squeezed his hand. "Boston made me educated and refined, but California made me strong." "You made me strong by believing I already was." You always were strong, Dalton. You just needed space to show it. As the years advanced into their 30s of marriage, 40s, and finally approaching 50, Dalton and Wade settled into the comfortable rhythms of a couple who had spent a lifetime together. They still worked the ranch, though less intensely as Thomas and his own children took on more responsibility. They traveled occasionally, visiting other parts of California, and even making one trip back to Boston, where Dalton showed Wade the world she had left behind. "I see why you left," Wade said as they toured the city where she had grown up. "It is beautiful in its way, but it is all surface. All manners and expectations and rules about how to be must have been suffocating for someone with your spirit." It was. "I just did not realize it until I found somewhere I could breathe freely." The trip to Boston also allowed Dalton to reconnect with her mother, now elderly and softened somewhat by time. The older woman looked at her daughter, sun-weathered and strong, so different from the refined young lady who had left decades ago, and finally said what Dalton had waited years to hear. "You were right, and I was wrong. You were never too fragile for that life. You were too strong for this one." Her mother gestured at the refined Boston surroundings. "I see that now. I am sorry I did not see it sooner." "Thank you, Mother. That means more than you know." It was a bittersweet reconciliation, coming so late in both their lives, but Dalton was grateful for it nonetheless. She returned to California feeling like a final piece of her past had been resolved, that she could move forward into whatever years remained with no unfinished emotional business weighing on her. Wade's hair turned completely silver, and Dalton's followed suit. They moved a bit slower, their bodies bearing the evidence of decades of hard ranch work. But their minds remained sharp, their partnership as strong as ever. They sat together each evening, holding hands and watching sunsets, talking through the day's events and planning for the future of the ranch that would outlive them. "We did good," Wade said one evening, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a life well lived. "Built something that will last beyond us. Raised children who will carry on our values. Made this corner of the world a better place. We did, and we did it together, just like we promised all those years ago under the oak tree. Best promise I ever made." When Wade passed away at 78, peacefully in his sleep after a long, full life, Dalton felt the loss like a physical blow. 50 years of partnership, of love, of building something together, and suddenly she was alone. The ranch seemed empty without his presence, the sunsets less beautiful without him beside her to share them. Their children and grandchildren gathered around her, offering comfort and support, but nothing could fill the Wade-shaped hole in her world. She stood under the oak tree where they had married, where they had built their home, where their initials were still carved into the trunk. "You kept your promise," she said to the empty air, hoping somehow he could hear. "You were strong enough for both of us when I needed you to be. And then you helped me become strong enough on my own. Thank you for every day, every sunset, every moment of this beautiful life we built together." Dalton lived another 5 years, continuing to manage the ranch with Thomas's help, watching more grandchildren grow and great-grandchildren be born. She told stories about the early days, about arriving in Mojave terrified and uncertain, about meeting a cowboy who saw past her perceived fragility to the strength underneath. She made sure the youngest generation understood that their great-grandfather had been a man ahead of his time, treating women as equals before it was fashionable, building a partnership based on mutual respect and shared authority. She established a final project in Wade's memory, a resource center for women starting businesses in California, offering advice, connections, and sometimes financial assistance. It was her way of honoring what he had done for her, extending that same support and belief to others who needed someone to tell them they were strong enough. When Dalton passed away at 83, surrounded by 3 generations of family in the house she and Wade had built under the oak tree, her last words were reported to be, "Tell him I am coming. Tell him I kept my promises too." The funeral brought what seemed like half of California, people who had known her as a pioneering rancher, a businesswoman, a political advocate, a philanthropist, a woman who had refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on her. But to her family, she was simply Grandma Dalton, who told the best stories and gave the best advice and showed them all what strength looked like when combined with love. They buried her beside Wade under the oak tree, their graves marked with simple stones that listed their names and dates, but also a single line that captured everything: partners in all things. The ranch continued under Thomas's management, then his children's, carrying forward the values and practices Wade and Dalton had established. The house under the oak tree became a family gathering place, filled multiple times each year with descendants celebrating holidays and milestones. And on quiet evenings, when the desert wind whispered through the oak's branches, and the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, people swore they could feel the presence of 2 souls still watching over the land they had loved, still partnership in whatever came after this life, still proving that love and strength combined could create something that truly lasted forever. The story of the fragile Eastern woman and the cowboy who offered to be strong enough for both of them became family legend, passed down through generations as a reminder that strength comes in many forms, that true partnership means supporting each other's growth, and that love, real love, sees past surface assumptions to the truth underneath. It was a story about the Wild West, about harsh desert country, about the challenges of frontier life. But mostly, it was a love story, pure and simple, about 2 people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built something beautiful together in the hard country that tested them both and made them stronger for having survived it. And that, in the end, was the greatest legacy Dalton Fairweather Vaughn left behind. Not the successful ranch or the businesses or the political changes, but the example of what was possible when someone refused to accept that they were too fragile for the life they wanted to live, and when they found a partner brave enough to believe in their strength, even before they believed in it themselves.